So in the last lesson, we looked at how we can get that data out of that JSON file and place it in as a JavaScript object. So now what we're doing here is we're just going to loop through data quiz content, and if you remember from the last one, it's just going to loop through these items that are available within that object. And again, if we were to add in, if we're going over to the JSON file, and if we were to add in additional questions, we can really easily do that. Question 5, and I'm just going to keep all of that the same. Actually, maybe I'll just remove out those so it does look a little bit different. And when I refresh it, I'm going to have all 5 objects now, and you can see that question 5 has now been added in as we're outputting it through. And I had actually removed out that console, so we're not able to actually see it within the console, but the quiz content would be the same. So all of this we're just looping through. So we're looping through object in data quiz content, and it's going to loop through all the items available in quiz content. So the first one, once we start the loop, we're just setting our output innerHTML. So again, here we had cleared out our innerHTML, and there's a lot of different ways to do this. You could build that up as a variable and then post it as innerHTML here at the bottom, so you wouldn't have to do all this adding, or you could append it. So a lot of different ways to go, but for this lesson we just want to keep everything really simple and readable. So all we're doing here, output innerHTML, we're adding or appending content into it. So we're doing whatever this outer innerHTML equals to, we're doing plus equals div. So we're just adding in that div at the top, and then here we're closing up that div that we had created here. So again, different ways to do it, but this is just for readability in order to work with the JavaScript content. So again, innerHTML, and here we're actually grabbing that quiz content object, and we're grabbing out question. So whatever value object is, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, because we've got 5 different questions here. So whatever that value is, it's going to return that value there, and it's going to ask and get a response on the question. And again, the question is right here. So this is the key value. It's just question text, and it's just pulling back that value. So I can just do quick updated, and you can see when I do refresh the page, this should be question text 1 updated, just to show you the relationship there. And all we're doing is we're just placing it in an h2 tag HTML and placing that return value into there. We can also do something like console log answers, because again, remember, we had a bunch of possible answers, and this again is dynamic, so it'll change. Some questions had 5 answers, some had 3, some had 6, 4, 2, so I think we covered off all the different values there. But yeah, the possibilities are endless. You could add additional answers or possible answers if you wanted to within that quiz, and all we're doing here is just doing we're taking that and setting it as a variable called correct answer. So we're just console logging that out right now so you can get a better idea of what we're listing out here. And we're listing out for each object, we're listing out all the answers that are available there within the console there. So that's what we just did there with the console. And again, we're picking up this value of correct, just like we did with question, but we're just picking up correct. And when we go back to the JSON file, we see that each one of these has correct, and whatever question is going to be correct is going to be the one that gets returned correct. So this isn't going to be like the array where we're just looking at those values. We're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's going to be the return value. So we're looking at if it has a value of 1, that's going to be the correct value. So just setting that up as a variable called correct answer. And here we've got start count, because we did want to count through all the different answers. And again, we're starting with 0 and we're adding 1 to it. So we could have started with 1 and done that addition here lower as we loop through it. Again, depending on how you want to do that, but just for readability's sake here, we're setting it at 0 and we're going to increment it here to 1. So got right. So this is going to be just recording how many answers we're getting right, and it's going to start at 0. So maybe we could actually even move this one out of this space, because we don't want to have to actually necessarily loop through that. And this was just going to be an overall, maybe a score or something, whatever you want to call it. Oops, sorry, no, that was actually that wasn't the score. So if we wanted to make a score, we'd have to keep it outside of the loop. But the reason we've got right there is that we're setting that value that we're passing over to the myAnswer function, and then from here we're checking to make sure if it's right. So this is why we're actually setting got right to 1 or 0, so just a Boolean value. And what we're doing here, we're checking to see if the correct answer, so if correct equals the start count, and if it does, the value is going to be 1. If it doesn't, it's going to be 0. So if my answer is a value of 1 that we're passing over, it's just a matter of just checking to see if that Boolean exists, and if it exists, then we do a correct answer, and if it doesn't exist, if it fails or false return, we'll just do a wrong answer. So sorry, that was my mistake. It wasn't actually the score, so that could be worked into the myAnswer there below. And then just below that, we've got the output innerHTML again. So we're setting up that innerHTML. We've got some bootstrap classes here for more elaborate effects, and we're also setting up this answers. So another option here for styling. You could also, if you want to tie it in, if you're using jQuery, it's a little bit easier to tie into a class. So as opposed to just JavaScript, where we'd have to loop through, but we're setting these dynamically. So we can't just simply loop through it because this content isn't actually loaded yet when we do the event. So we could pick it up on a button click and run through those values if we set a value in there, or we could do it like as we've done here on click. So for this circumstance, this is probably the easiest way to go. But again, if you're using jQuery, there's other ways to set that, and it all has to do with the listener events. So if we're just using on click, we don't have to actually set listeners, and that saves us a little bit of coding there going through that. So all we're doing innerHTML in the output. So again, output here, element by ID. So within here, it's just adding in this HTML code. So it's adding in button, type is a button, bunch of classes there, on click, and this is where it's sending over that got right value. So it's either 1 or 0. And 1 is for correct, 0 is for incorrect. And then here it's just looping through all the different answers that are available. So again, if we go down here and is right 1. So I'm just going to change that. So you can see that we're actually looping through the text that's available there. So it might look like we're just looping through, but no, we're actually taking out that JSON information and we're outputting it on top of the button as HTML. So we're giving it a value there. So going back to that, so that's what this is doing. It's just doing the same thing that it did over here with the answers, but here it's giving us which answer is being returned. So when we console logged out those, did we console log out answers? Yeah, there it is. So what we're doing is we're just taking this array of objects and we're just listing them out. So here we've just got all the different answers that are available here, and when we click down we can see, you know, answer, the first one value is answer 1. If we open up this one, we can see that the different values are available there, and we can see what's being returned on the buttons as well. So here we've got the first object, this one is this is right 1, and we can see that the text coincides. And then lastly, what we're just doing, we're closing off that div that we opened up in the beginning, and this completes our buildup of that HTML code that we're placing in within output. And this is the completed code that gets output here. So what it does is it loops through here, loops through all the buttons that are available, and then continues on to the next item, loops through that, loops through the buttons, next one, loops through that, buttons, and so on till it reaches the end of the file. And this is why this JSON format is much better and easier to use, because this one anyone can come in here and say, okay, well, you know, I want to build out a quiz. All I have to do, list my question. I've got images in here as well. So if you want to place images, you could easily pull back a source of an image here, place that in the innerHTML, and have the images update as well. And if you had multiple answers, so some questions might have 1 or 2 answers, some have 5, and this really does make it dynamic, a dynamic format to create these types of quizzes.